Hello and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Troy Beyer, and I have with me today kind of a fun one. This is my brother, Cody, and we're going to talk about ADHD. And he's already being awkward. This is either going to be the most ridiculous podcast that I never post because it's just ridiculous, or it's going to be really good. So the two of us are going to talk a little bit about what it was like to grow up as kids with ADHD, and also what it's been like as adults as we've kind of figured out what we need for ourselves to succeed in life, be dads, be husbands, get jobs, get degrees, all that kind of stuff, and kind of the things that we've had to struggle through. A little bit of backstory on me. So this is something that I've been excited to get up to do over the years with this podcast, because my real job, or my outside job, is I am the director of a special education program at a charter school in California. And I'm also a credentialed school psychologist and a board certified behavior analyst. So my world is dealing with kids with all kinds of learning disabilities, whether it's just learning disabilities in reading or math, things like that, or kids with autism or ADHD or emotional disabilities or any of the other, all that kind of stuff. Like, that's my life. And so the idea of diving into that aspect of what I do is going to be really fun. But then also bringing my brother in, who I personally have learned a ton from in the aspect of how to kind of manage my health and how that has impacted my ADHD, has been cool. So as we're getting into this, you look like you're actually serious and ready to do this. You're not looking like you're trying to be awkward.
I've already thought about 45 other things since you were talking for so long.
Awesome. Okay, so introduce yourself. Who are you? What do you do for a living? Like, what's your family situation?
Yeah.
Are you married? All that kind of stuff.
Cody Beyer. I'm an MRI tech. I've been doing that. I've been in the medical field for like 13, 14 years. It is what it is. It's an interesting job doing MRI. I'm at UCSD right now. I've been there for a few years. Got a 1-year-old. Been married for 9, coming up on 10 years. And
it's kind of weird that we're that old.
Yeah.
We've both been married for 10 or more years.
Time.
It's bananas. Yeah. Cool. Someone's phone's ringing. I think it's yours. We're good. Cool. So let's just kind of dive into it. So you're 6 years younger than me. And so our age differences when we were young were like a little bit different. So we'll dive into your story. When did you realize that maybe you were a little bit more squirrely than other kids? I mean, because for us, it was a little interesting because both of us were homeschooled when we were young. I was homeschooled for a little longer than you, because when our parents divorced, that whole, you had to go back to school and all that kind of stuff. And I was already in high school. But was there any point where you kind of realized that you were squirrely and kind of needed a little bit more movement than normal?
I actually thought about this. I don't know, because like I said, I was homeschooled until 3rd grade, and then when I went to school, I wasn't ready for it, at all.
Huh.
Right. I don't think that, my plan wasn't to go to school, so I don't think I was, academically, I was probably being taught because I was ADD, mom knew what my path was. So
right.
A lot of the things going into school, emotionally, I wasn't ready for school.
Right.
Period.
What was the path? Janitor or?
Yeah, exactly. That wasn't
professional motocross racer.
So going to school, I don't remember. I just remember it being a struggle, and it was kind of embarrassing because I think at the younger age, you just feel dumb.
Right.
You don't understand why is this hard? You're just I'm dumb.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Somewhere along the line, it was probably somewhere around high school, I realized oh no, I'm not dumb. I just don't really care. I think that's
right.
And it was probably kind of the defense mechanism of being school is hard, kind of regardless of if I try or I don't try.
Right.
I'm kind of smart enough to just get through it.
Right.
So let's just get through it. But I don't know if I ever really. It was somewhere around high school where I put it together. Maybe not ADD. I think there was still a lot of stigma about ADD.
Right, ADHD. So I'll jump into the diagnosis of ADHD real quick for everybody who's listening. I have a DSM-5 sitting right here. There is an updated version that's called the DSM-TR, which is text revisions or whatever, but there hasn't been any revisions to the ADHD. There is no longer ADD. That's not a thing. So attention deficit disorder does not exist. It's ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactive disorder. And then you have 3 categories. One is hyperactive, which is bouncing off the walls, which was kind of like, that's me. The other one is inattentive, where it's just kind of like maybe not really hyperactive, but you just cannot stay focused. Like your brain's just kind of like floating out. And as a special ed director, those are the harder ones to harder kids to identify, because they might behaviorally be fine in the class. Kids that are wired and just like all over the place and like standing up and rolling around the ground causing problems tend to be the squeaky wheel that we deal with more. The inattentive type are the type that are hard to catch. The third category is combined, where it's both hyperactive and inattentive, but they all fall under ADHD. In fact, like this is the criterion. So there's 6 or more of the following criterion to be ADHD inattention type. So it's fails to give close attention to details. I'm going to abbreviate. Difficulty sustaining attention, often does not seem to listen, often does not follow through on instruction or fails to finish work. Difficulty organizing tasks. That's a kind of what people call executive function. Organization of tasks is a classic ADHD thing. I have that problem, and I have to use, we'll talk about it later, but like all kinds of calendars and to-do lists and all that kind of stuff just to function. Avoids or dislikes, is reluctant to engage in tasks that require sustained mental effort, often loses things necessary for task activities, often easily distracted, and is often forgetful in daily activities. So those are the 6 for inattentive. For hyperactive and impulsive, which is the other category, is often fidgets with. So you have to fall within 6 of these. So they give all these categories. If you have 6 of them, then you're that guy. Fidgets or taps hands. Often leaves seat in situations when remaining seats are expected. So like remaining in seat is expected. That's a school thing. Often runs about or climbs in situations where it's inappropriate. Like my whole life. Often unable to play or engage in leisure activities quietly. Yep. Is often on the go or acting as if they're driven by a motor. Often talks excessively. Blurts out an answer before the questions have been completed. Has difficulty waiting his or her turn. Interrupts or intrudes on others. Butts in on conversations, games, activities, blah, blah, blah. And then the other one is combined, which is a combination of those. So I wanted to read those really quick for anybody who's listening or watching that just kind of wants to know what the official diagnosis is for ADHD. Now, those are kind of observable things. I personally have never been actually diagnosed by a psychiatrist or a doctor or psychologist with ADHD. However, I am one, so I'm pretty confident that I can read this and say, yep. Yeah. And as I'm reading these out loud, you're smirking and you're like, yeah, that's you. Yeah. Also, I can read those and I can know that you fall in enough of those categories that this is an accurate definition.
Well, I think too, like our mom, like there was never a need for it growing up.
Right.
Like
exactly.
She looked at it as like, yeah, dummy, you got it. Like, yeah. But like,
I don't know if she ever actually said, yeah, dummy. Don't want to diss our mom.
But yeah, that's all a paraphrase. But like, it was never really conveyed to me. And I think in high school was probably where that kind of started getting thrown around. Right. But like I said, there was like a stigma. It wasn't common. It was kind of like embarrassing to like hear that.
To say you have ADHD.
So like, yeah. I almost just didn't want, like, I never really wanted to like admit it.
Okay.
I figured out that I knew I was a kinetic learner.
Yeah.
Like I needed to move.
Yeah.
And touch and feel. And like school's not that.
Yeah.
So like you sit and you study and you're like, what are we doing here?
Whoa, dude.
Yeah.
I thought we were just going to talk crap the whole time. This is...
Why? So dumb.
This is the end of the podcast for sure.
Anyway. Yeah, like I knew that I was a kinetic learner.
Yeah.
So like I wasn't like, I knew that I needed to move, but
and
like
touch things to learn it. Yeah.
And like, I just knew that the classroom wasn't going to give me that.
Yeah.
So that's where you just kind of are like, I just don't really care.
Yeah.
And then like school for me, I needed a 2.5 GPA to not get kicked out and to play sports.
Got it.
So like I needed to try hard enough to get a 2.5.
Right.
Was basically what I did. And Christian High had zero like
actual supports. Yeah.
Resources to help a kid like me. Yeah. So I can tell you the exact moment where I figured out my brain, how it learned, and it was like the weirdest. I need to get my shit together.
It's okay, dude. No judgment. We'll just keep this video forever and then replay it.
It was the dumbest. It was like, I remember when I figured out how I needed to learn, it was halfway through somewhere my senior year. So I've made it this far through school.
Yeah.
I'm at home and like, we had these dumb spelling tests, just like where you spelling tests.
Yeah.
20 words. And I would like comically bomb these things. Like it was like, I would show up and it was like, did you study? And I'm like, no, I didn't study. Like, why would I study for this test? I'm going to get them wrong anyway. I still can't spell. So I sat down to study, and for some reason I was like, I'm actually going to study. And I was home alone, and I got immediately bored of sitting at my desk and reading the words. So I like stood up and I started like walking to the kitchen and like mocking studying, like reading the words but being like A, B, C, and like spinning around. Like literally, like if anybody would have seen it, they would have been like, sit down and study. Like no one would be like, studying, that's studying. I'm like, I did this for like 10 minutes, like just walking around the house. Like, and then all of a sudden I get back and I'm like, I think I accidentally just learned all the words. Like I'm like, I actually just learned, like, and then I go, yeah, like, I'm like, I remember going back and I'm like, wait, hold on. I spelled that one right this time. And like, was like, oh, I learned. And it wasn't even a matter of like,
that's awesome.
It wasn't hard. It was like, no, that was a 10-minute process of me just figuring out like, you mean if I just like
stand up,
move and like act like an idiot and study, that's actually studying. So like I go to like, and then I leave and I'm like, maybe I'll come back. I went to the garage and probably just turned on the table grinder and threw stuff at it and
what?
I don't know.
Is that a thing you did?
Yeah, I was an idiot. We had that Papa's table, that like 400 pound. Yeah, I would just
I still have it.
turn it on and grind stuff.
I use it. It says like 19
and just grind stuff, like just because it was cool. And come back like 30 minutes later and I read the words and I'm like, okay, I guess I learned the words. So
that's awesome.
I went to school the next day and get like 19 out of 20 right. And people thought I cheated.
Way.
People were like, you cheated. And I was like, I couldn't tell people what I did. I'm just like, I studied really hard. I'm like, no, I didn't study hard at all. Like, 10 minutes I studied and then all of a sudden this happened. From that point on, I think there was like a part of me that was like, I should probably get good grades just to prove to myself I'm not dumb.
Yeah.
So let's do that. And then part of it was like, let's get good grades just to prove that if I would have listened to mom this whole time, I probably could have gotten good grades the whole time. So like there was like some high school spite in like getting good grades for that last semester. I graduated with the best grades I've ever had. I mean, I was digging myself out of a pretty big hole at that point. I think I had like a 3.5.
I didn't even know that. That's awesome, dude.
I haven't thought about it for a long time. Like I thought about it and I was like, oh yeah, that was when I figured out I just needed to move. And then from that point on, like learning for the rest of I was still stuck in a school that didn't help me there.
Right.
So like you're still like in a classroom,
right,
being an idiot there.
Right.
But like I could go home and just spend not a lot of, it wasn't like I was investing more time. It was just actually useful the time I was studying.
Right. And no one at the school even like mentioned this.
Never.
That's
insane. I'm sure mom was like, you need to do this. And I was too stubborn to ever listen to her. Like that was the problem.
I mean, that's a high school boy thing.
Like I was,
in addition to your, mom's raising you. Right.
I mean, yeah, there's a whole entirely other conversation we had about the role of the divorce played in this. Like, I guess the underlying aspect of all that is like, that played a pretty massive role in my education. Cause like, part of it's like, you're just trying to survive.
Right.
So like school didn't really matter.
Right.
Like at some points, like more than others, you're like, I don't know, like, I'm just trying to figure out like life. Like,
right.
So.
And the funny thing with my story, so I started at the same school at Christian for a couple of years, and I don't know, I didn't struggle as much as you did to learn. Stuff was insanely boring to me. I did not care, didn't care. And I knew I knew when I was there, like school was pretty hard. When I was at Christian High, it was pretty hard. I did okay. But then I transferred to Valhalla public school. I never had an IEP or anything like that. But what I learned is that the expectations at the high school I went to were so much lower. It was so easy. I didn't need to try. Like
Yeah.
it didn't require me to study hard. And when I do remember though that, and this is classic ADHD, that when it came to like writing papers and essays and stuff like that, I would not and could not get myself to sit and focus and study or write a paper until I was about to freak out. Like, oh, this is a 4-page paper or 10-page paper due in the morning. And so like it was like my body needed this insane amount of pressure to get itself focused on doing something that like I couldn't do. I hated it. I could go outside and work on my 67 Camaro until the cows came home, like all day, all night. I could be out with my friends doing whatever. You sit me down and be like, write this paper. Even if the topic of the paper was interesting, I had to be forced into an insanely high adrenaline situation to focus on that thing. And I do also remember that in that kind of stuff, studying for tests was the same. Like finals are tomorrow, right? The biggest test in the world, finals are tomorrow. I would sit down and try to focus and study. No game. Unless it was the night before the test and I was like, you're going to fail the class if you don't pass this. But I also remember when I did that, the girl I was dating at the time, one time, because she was studying for this, like I was a history test or something. We were studying together, and like she was studying, I was farting around, like screwing with her dog, like that I hated the stupid dog, or like whatever, doing everything except for studying. And she was studying. She's like, "You're gonna fail. I'm like, I can't study. And then I remember like I left and went home, and then the test was tomorrow, and I just studied all night because I was like, I'm gonna fail the class if I don't study. The next day, I got like when the grades came out, I got like the second highest grade on that class in the entire grade level, and I got like an A+, and she got like a B-. And she almost broke up with me like right then and there. She's like, "What did you do? I know that you didn't study." I'm like, "I don't know. I just was like super stressed, and I like panic studied until 2 a.m, which is terrible. Like I had no other strategies at that point. What did you like? So after high school, let's kind of fast forward to kind of moving into adulthood and realizing like success had to come. What happened in those times? Because the things that I kind of started to learn was riding my dirt bike was huge. For some reason, what I learned is that when I would go to the track, I would be more focused on the drive home or for the next couple of days after going to the track and having like racing or going on just for like a ride day or whatever than anything else.
Yeah.
Like, so what was the system of like realizing, oh, I need some, like this stuff helps. What helped?
I mean, I think I figured that out even in high school. Like there was always like I always had some type of like physical challenge that I was trying to do. Even through high school. Like my first triathlon was 2004. Like I did it in high school.
Oh, you're right.
So like I got a road bike my sophomore year. And it was because I was at the time I was in this independent study program.
Yeah.
I was at home all day long. Like I even recognized at that point, I was like, I have too much free time. Like I couldn't drive. I didn't have a license. And I mean, I was supposed to be doing my work and there was I wasn't doing that. So I watched the Tour de France and was like, dude, I can get a road bike. This looks sick. And like got a road bike. And that was kind of like giddy up. Like I've been riding road bikes off and on since then. So like I've always had like some type of physical pursuit that I've always just kind of chased,
like gravitated towards.
Yeah.
Like your brain just,
and I've never
just wanted it.
Yeah. And I don't know if I really put it together till I was a lot older. Like that's like, it was my body, my brain saying I need to do this. Like it got me there. Like I didn't recognize it until retrospectively being like, oh yeah, these are the things that like make you tick and keep you together.
Yeah.
Right. So after high school, I knew I wasn't going to college, and that was part of the reason too. Like I wasn't interested in school. Yeah.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
I just needed a diploma. Like I saw you guys had jobs that made good money, so I'm like, listen, like. It doesn't seem too important to go to college.
Yeah, me and your brother weren't. Me and Shane weren't super helpful in the like go to college front. We were in mortgage banking, like in the peak of mortgage banking, when you could succeed in that industry being a blind.
So
moron.
I wasn't super worried. So like I got a couple of jobs, like that were all basically manual labor stuff, just whatever. and got a I got a motorcycle, and I still don't know if I like fully recognize the importance that stuff played at the time, but I was always like,
I just remember being super pissed at how good you got super fast.
Yeah, like I
You
was
were good.
always just so dedicated and so focused on like, I'm going to do this as good as possible. And like, that's all it was. Like I was just like full bore. So like that stuff kept me out of trouble for the most part. Because any time that I was not like physically pursuing something, like I started to fall off the rails.
Right.
That's where my life was going. So like those things inadvertently probably kept me out of jail. Like, I mean, honestly, like who knows? Because that energy is going to go somewhere for me.
Right.
So I already forgot the question.
What was... So, did I say the word ADHD? Okay. So we're not riding motorcycles now. No, the question was, what were the tools that you learned? So like writing the that you're in the process of learning that this is the thing that makes your brain focus and function. And we'll get into it later. Like I have studies on why bicycles are so good. Like there's all this research on it. So keep going.
I think a lot of that happened like way later in life. Like I was doing those things, but not recognizing what they were doing until like, I didn't recognize like, oh, I actually really need to do this until like much later in life.
Right.
Like I went to MRI school, and I still had like my tool was still like I knew this like the studying hack. Like really what it felt like was a hack. Like I can study this stuff the night before, because I would do online school during the week and then go to class on Saturday, like all day Saturday. And like I would study the night before like hard subjects. Like we did physics and all this stuff. And I had the highest grade in physics, both physics 1 and 2 that we did. Was it physics? Yeah.
Yeah.
But, and like, I remember the guy in my class being like, hey, he's like, how are you studying? And I would tell him, I'd be like, dude, I studied last night for 20 minutes. And then I would study on the drive, like not great, but like I would study on driving. Like as I'm driving up there, like I'd have the book or the notes next to me and be like, I'm gonna read these and not die. but like there was enough risk involved that it made me stay focused. Like,
that's hilarious. That is hilarious because that is one of the factors. There's 3 factors that keep an ADHD kid's brain attached.
I was trying to actually not die because I was studying while driving to Anaheim. Because the school was at Anaheim, so I had a long drive every Saturday, and I'm studying while driving, and then I'd get there and then just crush these tests.
You wouldn't stop for any reason at all.
Not at all, never.
You modified your vehicle, so you wouldn't have to stop, right?
I'd pee straight through the floor. It's the best thing ever. But so I used that tool all through school to get through school.
Not dying on the drive.
Not dying. It worked perfectly. And then, after that, you get into actual real life working. And that was kind of an adjustment because you're in I'm in a workplace. I can't, what do I do with my hands?
Right.
So
yeah, no, it's real.
I realized at that point, it was a lot of like physically writing notes.
Right.
Like, and just and I wouldn't really even have to go back and look at them. Like the act of me just physically writing everything down at work, like when I was learning and training, was almost enough to be like, okay, like I'm going to commit this, just keeping myself somewhat busy. And I still have like
so another piece of what you're describing is, so the studying thing in the car is hysterical because there's actually research behind why you were able to focus while driving. That's funny. There's 3 factors. So there's a book or an article that I found in 2010. It's when it was published, called "Writing Is My Ritalin," and it's about the kid who effectively did similar to what you did with your triathlon, where he was diagnosed in high school, decided junior or sophomore year, I don't like being on Ritalin. Like, this sucks. It makes me feel crappy. It changed my personality. But his dad was a cyclist. He liked riding his bike. He wanted to compete. So he was like, look, mom and dad, I sold him on this idea of like, I'm going to ride my bike before and after. I feel real good when I ride. Fine, you're going to do it. Because there's all kinds of research and studies on being super healthy and like physical activity and how that does help focus. So he went and he started riding his bicycle before and after school, and then was in a lot of races and became very, very successful cyclist. And they talked about the 3 factors that make riding a bicycle specifically very, very helpful for people with ADHD. And the first is risk. If you stop riding a bicycle, like if your brain disengages, you fall, you crash. And for like I ride mountain bikes. If you stop focusing coming down a hill going 20, 30 miles an hour, you're going to end up on your head on a rock. If you're on a road bike in a peloton or in a group of people, or even if it's like in your triathlon and you're swimming and there's 50 people around you, you're running and there's a million things to focus on that if you stop focusing, you get hurt. And so that risk factor is key to force your brain into a focused mentality. And I think that's why many of us with ADHD have to tend to procrastinate so much, because when you procrastinate, your brain gets that adrenaline of like, oh no, I might fail. And then forces you to focus on the thing. And like, that was my game. Like I had to wait until I was almost going to fail and then my brain could focus, but then I'd pass the test better than anybody else. The other aspect is with bicycling specifically that helps long-term is the balance. So balance gets your brain going through both hemispheres. So like your brain's bouncing back and forth between the right and left hemisphere, and you're doing like all this kind of cross midline activity stuff. Balance activity is another aspect of like forcing your brain into this activity that gives you long-term benefits. Apparently, the next one is hand-eye coordination and all of the activities like your brakes, your like all this kind of stuff. Like all of these activities combined make riding a bicycle like a very unique thing, and a very, 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 very efficient way to help kids with ADHD focus. And we use those at our schools, and that's why I have all these studies. There's this foundation called the Outright Foundation that was founded by Specialized Bicycles, and they did all this studies on like riding bicycles and how riding bicycles increase kids' ability to learn Portuguese. They took two groups. One group, neither of them knew Portuguese. One rode their bikes before and after. Then they like were learning words, and one of them was learning words twice as fast as the other one. There's all of these studies on the improvements in cognition and like brain activity. Actually, one was the decrease in brain activity, which basically was like focus when after riding bicycles. This one showing like at schools, the decrease in behavior problems, which is like there's zero, going from like lots to zero, and all of these others results in attention, increased focus, and so on and so forth. And all of this stuff has kind of come out of this Outright Foundation. And the riding bicycles is so core and has so many values. Even to kids without ADHD, but very specifically to those of us with ADHD, like I found the exact same thing. When I was on my motorcycle or my mountain bike, I could learn stuff. Like maybe not my motorcycle, because that's a whole different deal. But like I learned when I went back to school to get my bachelor's, because when I finished mortgage banking and I was like, I want to work with kids and help kids that were like me. I went back to school to get my bachelor's, and I studied on my mountain bike. Like I would listen to podcasts while I was riding. I would listen to as many things as I could listen to while I was riding my mountain bike. I remember when I studied for the Praxis, which is the School Psychologist exam, I made note cards, like these huge stack of note cards, and then read them into like a recorder, and then just put my phone in my pocket. I forget if it was a phone or an iPad. I forget it was a long time ago, but put it in my pocket, and I would just listen to myself repeat all of those over and over and over again on a mountain bike ride. And I did that the day before my mountain bike ride, weeks before my mountain bike ride, and I passed the test with flying colors. Same exact thing when I went to get my credentials of board certified behavior analyst. That is the hardest test I've ever taken. In fact, I failed it a couple times, but when I passed it, it was when I actually, when we weren't having a kid, but buying a house and moving in the middle of it. But when I passed it, I focused, but a lot of my studying was happening in the car. I was listening, and on a bicycle. The other thing that I learned was hugely valuable, and I learned it through that time, like going back to school, and then also trying to focus to work when I was in mortgage banking, was music. Is using music while I study, because there's some stuff you just have to sit down and get through it. And if you force yourself into the procrastination thing, then you just end up like this anxious anxiety mess all the time. Yeah. And so I would use there's all these studies on Baroque classical music, but I don't think you really have to go there. There's some studies recently that show you don't have to be like Baroque classical. The rule is for music to actually help, the volume has to be low. It can't be loud enough to be in the forefront of your mind, or forefront of your mind. It has to be kind of low, has to be no words, and it has to have kind of a simple repetitive beat. And so for me, it was like techno or house music. So like, it's just in the background. Yeah. And so I would wear headphones because I, wouldn't want to bother my wife when I was studying. And I would just put on my headphones, and that's how I would study. Or when I first became a school psychologist and I was writing 40-page psyche evals 3 times a week, I would be up till midnight, but I would just have my just like writing my stuff. The second a song came on that has words, like I'd be out. I'd be like singing, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, God. Yeah. It's like you got to make sure there's no words. One thing I want to go back to, and this is for anybody listening. I don't want to diss private schools too much, but I want to diss private schools because there's a misnomer with private schools and kids that have like specific needs. I'm not pushing a lot of public schools. I work at a charter school, and we were able to do some very specific things at our charter school that are amazing that all public schools can't do either. But private schools specifically, they're not held to the same standard as a public school or a charter school is. And your experience, I mean, I remember your experience at the school and how they treated you. And like the idea that their accommodation was like, oh, we'll just give him a grade higher. Like, I remember that was what they had decided to do. When he gets D's, he'd just get C's.
Yeah, there was a few classes. I don't know if it was all my classes, but I had like these contracts that were just like, we're just add 10% to your grade.
Like, did 0 to help you?
0.
In fact, they wasted your time because, to be honest, like the kind of stuff that you learned by yourself in your senior year, we're giving that advice and like helping kids figure that out when they're in 3rd grade. Yeah. I mean, in fact, right there in my office, here, I'm going to go grab it. We use these things. I have this in my office. My desk is right there. I use this thing. It's just a little balance board. You sit there and you can stand on it, and it gets you engaged in balance activities. And there are so many ways, like if you're a parent listening to this, there are so many ways to help your kid while they're in school. And every kid's different. Like me and you are very different in the way that ADHD manifested in us. But like each of my special ed teachers, they have like 5 of those, and they'll have kids learning their sight words or CVC words or learning math facts standing on that. I've even walked in there and they have kids standing on this and they're answering questions for a test. Like, it's so frustrating that just that kind of simple stuff was not even mentioned when you were in 5th grade. Like, give me a break.
Yeah.
So I guess my point is, don't assume because you're paying all this money for this fancy education that these people know how to educate. Make sure you're your kid's own advocate. I guess that's my point. I don't know. So anyway, back to your story. So you're just now driving up to LA, peeing through a tube in the bottom of your truck that you cut a hole. and studying and trying not to die. So you get your degree and you're working now, right?
Yeah.
And so in the last 10 years, how have you refined your life? And maybe not just like strategies to keep yourself focused, but like the reason why I'm teeing you up, because you have studied a ton on general health, nutrition, like exercise.
Yeah.
You follow some very specific health guys, and I've learned a ton from you, and that's kind of how I've mirrored the way I eat and work out and stuff like that. So like, what have you learned in practice about health, exercise, and like training that has helped you be more focused and successful?
So like I said, I got my first road bike way back when, and that was always kind of like, I never put the pieces together, but like inadvertently, I always just rode bikes and did that. And then had a motorcycle for a little bit, had to sell it to go to school. When I finally got a job and went to the real world, like I had adult money. So my first thing I bought, like immediately, a motorcycle. And like that kind of set me on the track.
Was that Jeremy McGrath's motorcycle?
No, that was the one I bought. That was the other one I sold.
Oh, okay.
I bought another motorcycle, and that kind of set me on the path again of being like very disciplined and figuring out like I'm going to train every day. And funny you talk about balance. Like I have oddly good balance. Like I don't think
I can confirm that.
I don't think I'm like necessarily excel at anything. I have an oddly good balance. And I've like trained it though. I have an endo board that like if you fall.
No, I remember you had that indoor board when you were.
I still have it and I use it.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, no, I still have it. So like Yeah, I like trained balance. So like, it's funny you talk about that, but
you probably liked it. You were drawn to it,
yeah,
because it did something to your brain that your brain's like, this is great.
Yeah, that's the thing. I feel like there was a lot of these things that I was I was drawn to because my brain needed it before I retrospectively was like, yeah, this I accidentally figured all this stuff out because but like my health and all this stuff really kicked off when I got super into cycling, and then also got super sick because I essentially overcooked myself. Right. I was like, was training way too much, had just gotten married, was way overstressed, job. Like I was dealing with the adult world, and also like diet wasn't awesome. Mm-hmm. Like in your mid 20s, you can kind of get away with whatever you want. And then until you can't, like, that's, so like I got to a point where I was so tired, like not tired, I was so exhausted. Like I would go to the grocery store and I couldn't drive home.
Oh, wow.
Like, and I went to multiple doctors, and the doctors were like, you're just getting older. Like that's the healthcare system. So that's another story.
Private schools and doctors.
But, a chiropractor out of all people was the one that was like, hey, I've worked with other athletes that have had this similar thing. Let's do this test. And then she sent me to a naturopath. Mm-hmm. That kind of set me down this path of really figuring out my health. Because it turns out I had an adrenal issue to where my body just stopped producing cortisol, which is like your stress response hormone. Yeah. Like was producing zero of it. So like my body just was like, meh. Wow. So that's when this whole like health and fitness thing really got kicked off.
That was like 10 years ago?
About 10 years ago, yeah. So that was also, I think, when I really started figuring out podcasts. And then when I put the two together, like I can ride a bike and listen to podcasts and absorb every bit of this information. Right. Like, and then get done and do it again and do it, like just do it again. Yeah. I was riding... Before, I was riding 10 hours a week at minimum. Like I trained and rode a bike a ton. That's 10 hours a week is a lot to listen to podcasts. And that's all, really.
You're just listening to health podcasts, right?
Pretty much.
A lot of Peter Attia, right?
He came on later. Like there was a lot of just random stuff in there. And it's funny you talk about music because like I actually almost intentionally avoid music because it affects my mood so strongly. Yeah. Like I have an opposite reaction where I get myself in weird headspaces listening to music inadvertently. And I'm like, what is happening here? So I like almost when I'm exercising, you want to listen to music to pump yourself up. But like now, like I kind of don't want to because I'm trying to like control my heart. I'm trying to like control my heart rate and do all this stuff. So it's like, I don't listen to music because it controls too much of me, actually. So it's a weird... I use it as a tool. It's a very specific tool that I have that I use, but it's like I can't do that.
You have to be aware of it, and that's a really good point because, like I said earlier, you and I are different. Like, I am very affected by music as well, and that's why if I'm going to study, I have to have the exact right kind of music. The volume has to be exactly right. It cannot have words. It has to, like if it is anything a little out of this, then all of a sudden I'm an hour into this and I've done nothing. And I'm like, what am I doing? And all of a sudden I'm watching YouTube videos of race cars or something stupid, and so, anyway, music is very, very specific. So I think that if someone is listening to this, take advice from this, and you have a kid or yourself that you're trying to test the music thing out on, be very careful and test different styles. And the rule really is, the research shows, has to be low volume, has to be kind of playing in the background of your mind, cannot have words, has to have a very simple, repetitive beat. Yeah. And Broke Classical is one of those, and it's pretty safe, to be honest, because like it's not really something that's gonna make you super amped and angry. Yeah. But most kids are like, Eric, classical's lame. I mean, whatever. That's not the point. The point is just to have this thing that occupies the part of your brain that's like, bird, what's that? What's that? Yeah. What's that? So you can use this part of your brain to just, be there. So anyway.
So that was kind of set me down the health and fitness route. And I think also his podcasts have probably turned me into a lot more of an auditory learner. Yeah. Because that's all I'm doing. Like I can't read words and listen and pay attention at all. I have actually in the last, I mean, I can't barely read. I'm barely literate.
I'm sorry. I'm clipping that part out. I'm just going to
yeah,
send
it's
it to
fine.
I can't read words.
Can't read words. Out of the sheer discipline of it, I have attempted over the past few years to like read books. Like just for the discipline of it. It is so hard.
It's miserable.
I read a book. This is true. I've read a book about Indians called Midnight of the Summer Moon.
You talked about that book for so long.
It's an incredible, crazy
Did it
book.
take you a year to get through it? Because you talked about it for a year. Like
it's
every time I saw you, dude,
they're making a movie out of it. The Yellowstone guy,
yes,
is making a
great,
series. Anyway,
great focus.
I read a large majority of that book. I had to read out loud in a Western accent. Because the second I start getting quiet and reading, I'm just like, nope, I got to do something else. So the reason it took me so long to read is because I could only read at home alone when no one's around. Like,
did your wife ever go, what are you doing?
I would do it as a joke when she was around every now and then, and she's like, you can't be for real. And I'm like, this is how I read when you're not here. I get a Western accent.
That's real?
Oh, 100%.
Okay,
You could ask her. But I was so tuned into that story because I would read it out.
That's awesome.
It was a way to turn it into some kind of movement, really.
Yeah.
So, and I read the whole book. I remember the whole book. It was an incredible book.
And you ended up with a sweet Western accent because you practiced it for a year.
Yeah. I haven't read a book since because I can't read sports books with, I don't know what accent that is. So
yeah. Well, the good thing is now, like, and this is the beauty and I tell parents this all the time. This is the most anti-school thing ever, but with books and stuff like that, and parents are super worried about kids not reading, which they need to know how to read. Like, you need to know basic phonics and know how to read. That's fine. But kids aren't meeting their guide, how fast they should read, stuff like that. In this day and age, who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares? Everything that you can get, everything, even if it's a PDF or a piece of paper, I can take a picture of this and my phone will read it to me.
Yeah.
Like every book you can find on Amazon, anywhere, you can get on your Kindle, or you can get on Audible, or you can buy the CDs. Like everything that we can learn, you can get a hold of it for your ears. And if the purpose of reading is to learn, who cares if you're reading with your eyes or listening with your ears? If the purpose is the content, then the activity of reading with words, with your eyes, is worthless. Because what I've learned with myself is that often when I'm reading, my comprehension will go down because I'm focusing so hard on reading. Like on the act of reading. Like I also hate reading. I'm way better now because I have a daughter and I've read the entire Narnia series and the entire like Little Women, or what's on the range, House on the Range.
Little Woman?
No, not that one.
I don't know if you should do that. That's bad.
No. I don't know. I literally just read this. My wife's gonna be so mad I don't remember what the name of it is.
Little House on the Prairie?
There it is. Little House on the Prairie. There's like 7 books and they're actually really good. So the idea of reading, if the purpose of reading is the content, who cares? Yeah. If the purpose of reading is learning how to read, then fine. Like you said, discipline. Like that's fine. Like do those things. But let's not beat up our kids and make them feel dumb because they read slower or their phonemic memory when they're reading something with their eyes is so low. Throw that book on on Audible and see if they remember it as well. Because most of the time, many kids that I've seen and adults that listen to something that they're not having to read it, they remember it way better. And I'm exactly like you. I can listen to anything. My wife, her mind is blown when I'll go listen to a podcast, or like she'll say I'll go listen to a sermon or something theology, and I'll come back and I'll quote it word for word. And she's like, how did you do that? I'm like, I just listened to it. I was riding my mountain bike. Yeah. And so do not beat up your kids over reading unless just don't do it. It's kind of stupid, And the other thing, spelling words are stupid. They're dumb. Eventually, the tools that we have in this day and age for spelling and typing, your text will auto-spell for you, Word will auto-spell for you, Google Docs will auto-spell for you. You can just speak things into existence, like voice-to-text exists. There are so many tools that are so readily accessible for anybody. In the real world of life, you are not hindered by, I can't spell, or I can't read fast. Like,
Yeah.
and I can't write an essay. How many times in most jobs, and I'm not talking about research job, maybe if you're writing research articles, fine. But in most jobs, how many times in those jobs it's like, okay, sit down and you need to write me a 4-page essay about this thing in the next 4 hours. That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You know, you're an MRI tech. You make insane good money. Like, you don't need to do those things. There's so many jobs. So it makes me so mad when parents and teachers obsess about this, when it's like, this kid isn't made for that. This kid is going to thrive doing a million other things, and he learns just as well, if not better than you do, just by listening to it. So anyway, there's my soapbox. I'm going to get all pissed off. You know, remember, this is not the school podcast, so I can say things like pissed off. What else? So you're any other tools that you've learned how to use? So we've talked about music, we've talked about movement, we've talked about balance. We've talked about, like, what about being a dad? You know, I watched you had your podcast with your Trailer Trashlete.
Yeah.
Is that still what your YouTube channel is?
No, the Trashlete.
The Trashlete.
Yeah.
The Trashlete. So if you want to see some awesome triathlon stuff, go to the Trashlete. But you know, your most recent one was really cool. Like your ideas of what was going to happen after you had a kid, and now you actually have a kid, and like how you're making it happen. Like, you're keeping your health in check.
Yeah.
And you're able to be even more focused and more deliberate now that you have a son.
Yeah.
Than before.
Yeah.
So, like, what have you learned about yourself through this? Because that was pretty cool. That was one of the reasons why I called you up that day, because I watched that. I'm like, this is rad.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I think what's interesting is time has gone on. You would think, like, ADD would, I don't know, you'd grow out of it,
No.
but you just don't. And I mean, like, I'm super active. I would say I'm one of the better performers at my job, like all these things. But it's like, nobody cares at my job if I screwed up and they're like, oh, I have ADD. Like, that's the thing too,
Right.
about, like, when you get into the real world, no one's going to make accommodations for you. It's kind of, you know, like,
Right.
nobody cares. You know, like,
Right.
the real world doesn't care that you have ADD. Just get the job done. Doesn't matter how
Right.
you do it.
Right.
So as becoming a dad, and I think as time's gone on, one of the biggest struggles for me is, I think parts of it has actually gotten worse. Like, especially with technology. Like, technology
absolutely.
is such a hard thing, and it's made it, for me, like, so readily available to have a phone is just a constant disaster at times, right? Like, it's gotten, like, and it sounds, you have to just go to the dumb, like, I just need to, like, lock it, turn it off and put it away from me. You know, it's too easy to just continually, like, that's something that, like, as a dad and things like that, have, like, really I think it's been more, like, highlighted since I become a dad. Like, this is a problem, like, that hasn't gone away. That probably is actually, technology is making it a little worse in some aspects,
Right.
even though I'm doing all the right things. So there's been that aspect of it, but I've been very diligent, and this is something that, like, my wife, we've both been very, I've just never wanted to be that, like, cliche, like, oh, I had a kid and just can't do it. Like, it makes me so mad. Those cliches to me make me so, like, it really is, like, more than anything, a revolt against being that dumb cliche of being like,
Right.
when you have a kid, all that stuff's gonna go away, and it's like, beat it. Like,
Yeah.
that's because you made it, like, you let it happen.
I think that all three of us, Shane included, have kind of beat that cliche.
Yeah, like, that's so part of the athletics is, like, I think it will, for sure. It's coming. Like, I think after this year, I'm going to dial it back. This year's been a bit much, but I wanted to do it to be like, it doesn't need to stop. Like,
Right.
you can still try. I train, like I said in that video.
You just wake up earlier.
Yeah, like,
Right?
I was really worried when I was gonna have a kid. Like, the training's done, I'm not gonna be able to race. It's gonna be all different. I was all dramatic about it and sad. And then I had a kid and was like,
It was pretty dramatic.
I was
It
so
was
dramatic.
so
I was
emo,
super,
like the
like,
most.
So emo. I was so sad. And then
it was
and then
weird.
like, I realized I wake up at 5 o'clock to go to work, and I work 3 days a week. And then on my days off, I was like, if I just wake up at the same time, he doesn't get up till like 6:30. Oh, sweet. I can just train in the morning. Okay, cool. And then he takes a 2-hour nap like 3 hours later, sweet. I can train for 2 hours in the like.
Yeah.
It's made me, like I said in that video, I'm way more focused about how my time is used because you just don't have the amount of time to goof off.
Right.
So like I wasted more time when I had more time because I could.
Right.
Now I don't have any time to waste, and I don't waste any of it, and I train more than I did before I had a kid.
Totally.
So it's made me, in some aspects, a lot more focused because you just don't have the time. Like it's do it now or never do it. I always had the option of being like, well, if I don't do it now, I can do it later.
Right.
So it's made me more focused in a lot of areas because you realize how much time you can actually waste when you have a lot of time to waste.
Right.
You know,
it's funny you say that. It's the same theory, and honestly, I've never put these pieces together. Like I'm a school psychologist, I deal with this every day. Like I'm obsessed about ADHD because I have it. But the way that you're connecting these dots is super funny because we talked about like the car thing. Like you force yourself to study in the car, and it was like high risk, right? Like I'm gonna die, I'm gonna study, which is funny and dangerous, and do not do that. But no, don't. Don't. But then we talked about motorcycles and bicycles and like the risk factor, and we do know that research shows that a heightened risk does in fact force your brain. And then we brought in the idea of ADHD, classic procrastinators, to where you won't do something to the last minute, and that does raise your adrenaline level and it forces you to focus, and there's like this risk factor involved in that. I think that's exactly the same thing that we both have learned, because I've learned the same thing as I've had a kid, right? You know, before you have a kid, like you could waste all the time in the world. Same thing as marriage. Before you get married, you can just like, whatever, you know. And so like,
I don't remember what that was like. It's crazy to me.
Yeah, it's crazy, a long time ago. But like before you have a kid, you can blow all the time in the world. You're like, what have you done today? I don't know, stuff like.
Yeah.
But now that you have a kid, the risk factor has increased, like the seriousness has increased, and it's now like, I think it's the same kind of, the function of it is the same as like as the procrastination, where you're kind of like, whoa, I won't get this at all if I don't do this now.
Yeah.
And if I don't make this happen now, it's never going to happen. Therefore, I have to do this. I have to build routines, and I have to build all this stuff. And that's exactly what I found. Like I wake up at 5 o'clock now every day, and I've got like an hour and a half before my daughter wakes up. And so that's when I get all my stuff done. I can cook, I can listen to a podcast, I can listen to whatever Bible scripture I'm listening to. I can do whatever I want to do and kind of have that time where I do stuff, I work out. Then she wakes up and it's game on. And then I'm getting her ready. We're going to school. I'm coming to work. I'm whatever. And then, after work, it's just like your time has to be so much more deliberate that I think having a kid and the more responsibility you have in life, because I don't think you necessarily have to have a kid to add that responsibility, but it's a really easy, natural one, right?
Yeah.
And so just to kind of recap, the things that have been hugely helpful for me, and it sounds like you, would be starting to like force yourself to have routine.
Yeah.
And like forcing it and making it serious, like kind of like adding some kind of risk. If this doesn't happen, then blam. So you have to have this routine. Doing a lot of activities that have to do with balance. Like just balance activities are hugely valuable. And sometimes a bicycle is not available. That's why we have these balance boards, and we do like all kinds of stuff. So like if you can't just get on and ride a bicycle every day, but if you're a kid or you are trying to learn stuff or study, stand on the balance board. It also is really good for your core strength, which is really good for longevity and blah, blah, blah. Exercise, being fit, being very fit. And anybody can be really fit. Different body types have different performance levels, but anybody can be really fit. Be as fit as you can possibly be for your body type, right? Yeah. Eating healthy. And there's some things in here, and I've spent a lot of times recently studying. In fact, we put out these like nutrition videos, and I did a bunch of research on nutrition. Like the food that we are being sold at most stores is just straight trash. Like if you cannot read the ingredients, if you do not know what the ingredients are in the food you're eating, don't eat it. Dyes are terrible. Kids with ADHD with red dye, yellow dye, blue dye, all of those dyes, very specifically kids with ADHD and autism, have major bad effects. So if you're a parent of a kid with those things, look at their ingredients. If you're looking at Doritos, Cheetos, Takis, all of those snack foods are crap, and they will cause your kid to just spike and then crash, and it takes days for that stuff to get out of their system. It's literal poison. Like the food you eat is so important. Actually, talk about food, because you haven't even talked about that yet.
That could go on for another hour. I think like the general overarching thing about food is if you are not, like, food has gone so far past being healthy that if you are not actively trying to eat, I would say very healthy, you are actually eating very unhealthy.
Yeah.
By default. And like, you don't have to be trying. Like, your diet, if you are not actively just trying to eat clean and healthy, is terrible. The biggest things are, like, I think for me, the biggest things are sugar and caffeine.
Yeah.
Like, sugar is such a huge one because sugar's in everything, and
yeah,
sugar was the primary, like, the big driving factor, one of the big driving factors behind my health problems. Is
really?
I mean, it was a 15 factor, but like the sugar in my diet was a big factor of my whole health issues. And now I eat.
How much sugar a day do you eat? Like grams?
See, I use sugar actually now. To me, sugar's a tool.
Okay, so let's forget let's forget training. Let's forget training day. Let's forget riding day, because I'm the same way. Like, we'll dog Red Bull or these energy drinks all day long. They've got crap in them. But if I'm gonna drink a Red Bull right before I go on a 25-mile mountain bike ride, I'm gonna burn through that in 30 seconds.
Exactly.
It's not gonna be a problem. If I'm gonna drink a Red Bull at noon while I'm sitting in my office on my desk, it's going to be a problem, and I'm going to be a mess.
Yeah.
And so let's just say on an average day, no training, average day, maybe a normal bike ride. Like, I say for kids, it's 23 grams. Kids should not have more than 23 grams.
I don't pay attention to, like, actual grams. It's effectively, for me, it's just as little as possible.
All right. Do you eat fruit?
I don't count fruit sugar as real.
Okay.
I don't count that. I've never had that argument with somebody who was not out of shape. Anytime I've ever heard someone be like, there's sugar in fruit, they're never in shape. I've never seen an obese person eat too much fruit. I mean, it's such a nonsense argument. Like,
got it.
It's not. So fruit, sugar, and
the hydration you get from eating fruit is hugely valuable.
And the fiber in it, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And getting rid, if I could say wipe one thing off the map, it would be sodas.
Oh yeah.
Liquid, and it's not even the total sugar. It's the form that it comes in is
fructose corn syrup.
You couldn't make a worse form of sugar because it's liquefied, so your body uptakes it immediately. There's nothing to slow it down. It immediately is uptaken your body, immediately huge spike, and then a huge crash. Like, it's terrible. So sugar is the big one. Outside of that, like, if it doesn't have legs or grow from the ground, like, don't eat it. That's honestly, think a lot of, like, it doesn't have to be overly complicated. Like, it can be very complicated, but when it comes down to eating clean, like, I always say, walk around the perimeter of a grocery store. Yeah, that's where all of your meats, that's where all of your vegetables and everything are going to be. Yep. All the aisles are full of all your super processed foods. Like, minimize as much of that stuff as you can. And then caffeine. I think in general, caffeine, people are way, way, way too reliant on caffeine. Yeah. It's a drug. Like, caffeine is a drug.
It's a drug.
I use caffeine as a tool, just like I use sugar. But it's like, I understand, like, it has a place and a time. Like, kids don't need to be drinking Red Bulls. Like, kids don't need all that stuff. Like, no. I didn't drink coffee I didn't regularly drink coffee or caffeine until I was mid to late 20s.
Yeah, I think me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I almost wish I wouldn't have. Like, honestly, like, I almost wish I would have never started, because now it's just like, yummy bean water. Like, I just want to drink it all the time. Like, so it's like, but yeah, I think those are the big overarching things of diet.
Okay. So, and I've noticed with kids that have ADHD, and mostly ADHD, those things affect them more. Mm-hmm. And to a higher degree. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's interesting about ADHD is that sometimes, though, like, caffeine and sugar has, like, an adverse effect. And I think part of the reason why a lot of kids with ADHD are driven to like these Monsters and Red Bull and stuff in high school is because they feel like it calms them down. The problem is it's insanely dependent creating, and then it turns into fat, and it makes them. I mean, it actually will stunt their growth and all this other stuff. So like that for a short minute, it might have some kind of benefit. Where like back in the day when I was a kid, it was like if you drink a Mountain Dew and it calms you down, you definitely have ADHD, right? Yeah. Like that's kind of a wives' tale, and I believe there's some truth to that. However, it's not like making it better. It might be like, oh, cool, it made it better for 10 minutes, but then you're like a spike and a crash away from like, you know, taking a nap, being in a bad mood, throwing your books across the classroom, you know, like all of those things still happen. But for this short period, like, oh, I feel a little better. It's like crack. Like crack, from what I've heard, makes you feel really good. Makes you feel really good for this time period. But I live in East County, San Diego, El Cajon, and I see crackheads all over the road,
They're not feeling good.
No, all over all these homeless people that are blatantly have ruined their life because for this time period I felt better, but then you just ruin your life. Yeah. And sugar, although not as extreme as drugs, is a form of a drug, and it's doing a similar thing.
And it's super, super addictive.
Exactly. Like, also, the crazy thing. So another thing. Speaking of drugs, like Ritalin or a lot of ADHD medications are actually an amphetamine. Mm-hmm. That's what they're derived from.
Have you ever looked at the chemical structure of Adderall?
Isn't it the same as crystal? Or something like that?
It is like the little things. It is almost indistinguishable from crystal meth.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's an amphetamine.
Yeah.
Like that's what they are. And that's why it's so much abused in colleges. ADHD medications are the most abused drug possible, and they say that
there was a shortage.
Was it like 7 out of 10 kids in college are using them?
It's a lot.
Yeah,
like all of them.
Totally. Okay, well, the camera's dying, so I think we're about done. Do you have anything else to add, like final notes?
I mean, I think if you have ADD at some point, like you get out of school, it falls on you. Like no one's gonna help you. So like, at some point, you can't be a victim to it.
Yeah.
Don't be a victim. Period. Like that's maybe just a life general. Don't be a victim. Yeah. But like, take it upon yourself to have discipline. Like you're gonna, as much of I guess we've talked about a lot of the disadvantages and like the hardships of ADD. There's a whole conversation about like it can also be kind of a superpower.
That's what I was just.
So like
The Disruptors.
There's the whole.
Look up the movie The Disruptors on Amazon. Look that up.
There's a whole aspect of ADHD that like it only is going to affect your life in a negative way as much as you allow it to affect your life in a negative way.
Yeah.
So that should be the upside to this whole thing.
And that's the thing that we have. You're right. We haven't talked about that yet. Yeah. We're an hour and 3 minutes into it. Let's touch on this really quick. I have 2 college degrees. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in school psychology. I have a credential in school psychology. I am a board-certified behavior analyst. And
it's all made up.
Huh?
It's all made up.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. And I'm the program director of a special ed education program. I manage 40 people and millions of dollars of budget and all that kind of stuff. Like, I am relatively successful in life. I own my house. I'm married. I have a kid. Blah blah blah. You work for UCSD. You're an MRI tech.
I ride bikes a lot.
And you ride bikes a lot. You're married. You live in a beautiful home in Alpine. Like we have succeeded at doing life. Yeah. Like we are not failures at life. Yeah. You are a hugely productive human being. You're winning triathlons. Your kid is stoked. Your wife is stoked. Like to me, people have asked me a couple times, like over my life, how have you done so many things? And I'm just like, I don't know. I just do more things.
Yeah, it's probably because you have ADD.
100%. Like if you go down like all of the achievements you've had over the years, and you've done this, you've raced motorcycles, you've done this, you've done that, you've got real into longboarding there for a while. It was really super good balance.
Chickens. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, all this crazy stuff. Actually, yeah, you're a full-blown chicken farmer. And so like all of these things that are completely disassociated with each other. Oh, we both did a lot of lighting, professional lighting for like events, concerts, stuff like that. I mean, the achievements that I have been able to achieve, I kind of give credit to ADHD
Yeah.
because my brain does not stop. Therefore, I just don't let it stop. Fine, let's do a bunch of things.
Yeah.
Let's start a podcast about manhood and about like we can talk about this stuff. Let's try to write a book. I'm halfway through a book. I mean, and my brain just won't stop. And I think you're very, very similar.
You have to be, you just have to have the discipline to figure it out, so that's maybe the biggest key to this whole thing is like, it's only like I said, it's only a disadvantage if you allow it to be a disadvantage.
100%.
So
Sweet.
I don't know.
Anything else?
If you're a parent of a kid with an ADHD kid, like set the example.
Yeah. Set the example. Get him riding bikes. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the thing. I've watched kids' lives change.
I mean, but
riding a bicycle.
If you want your kid to be healthy and exercise, do it yourself as a parent.
100%.
You know what I mean? Like, don't expect your kid to ride a bike if you don't want to ride a bike or go out. If you want your kid to go out and run around, like go out and run around with him. Okay, everyone's going to benefit from eating healthy and being more active.
That's really true. Wisdom. Be the change, people. All right.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sweet.
We're like an hour and 6 minutes, but I'm pretty sure I'll cut out a bunch because my camera stopped and I'm an idiot. So thank you very much. This is a good one. And yeah, see you on the flip side.
Sweet. Catch you in the Meninge.
Kim Meninge. What? In God's name, giddy up.